Alright, so we are up to part 3, which is the play for Samuel Harvey of Dorothy Dunnett's A Game of Kings. This is in the Lymond Chronicles. So, chapter 1, The Bitter Exchange, is in Will's POV. Yay! We love it! I mean, I love it. I love Will's POV because we are as clueless as him, so he asks all of the questions and is as confused as we are. Thank you for at least having one character as confused about Lymond as we are. He's just the king of inconsistency. It's so ridiculous. He literally has just like told Lymond off for his using of women, and now he's just saying, this is page 241, perhaps he was entitled to a unique relationship with the steward girl. Perhaps it was none of his business. Like, he's now convincing himself that he needs to stop thinking about Christian and Lymond. Oh my gosh. But definitely he's all like, what is going on with Meg Douglas? Like, what is the situation here? What is the relationship between Meg and Lymond? And we're like, yeah, really good question. Will would totally be reading this book still super confused, just like we would be, despite actually living in the time. He'd be like, yeah, I still don't get it. But actually, we start, what are we going? Now we're going to, Lymond is meeting up with George Douglas. This is page 243. They're moving and because Lymond's like, Peel Tower's getting a little bit busy, we're gonna move elsewhere. So they're moving to a new hideout, which makes sense to me because I was getting a little bit confused about how a whole bunch of men were just staying in the same place and not getting discovered. So I'm glad that's dealt with because it was a little bit fishy to me about how they weren't moving around a lot. Anyway, so we get back to Lymond rocking up to George's castle. Well, it's so weird. It's like Lymond just walks in and he's like, hey, it's me again. And George is like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, it's the guy, it's the guy, it's the guy. What is happening here? He just seems to be able to waltz in wherever he likes. This is totally normal behavior. It's a super creepy castle that they're in as well, and Lymond just rocks up to it. So yeah, we've got George being like, can you please just give me Will? I really need him for my own shit. If you can just hand him over, I will be very happy. Oh, he's so self-serving. And Lymond, I love how this is the top of page 243. Often we get this description of Lymond speaking idly. I love that. He's just like, can you not, bro? Can you just, sorry, I have to be idle. He's saying, bro, can you not? Can you just find another way? Like, this is really annoying. This is literally what Lymond is dealing with. He's just so sick of this line of questioning about Will. And he's offering other things as well. Maybe he's just trying to be all cool about it because Lymond kind of likes Will. He totally does. He's fond of Will, I would say. Like in a brotherly way, like older brother to younger brother kind of way. Then the funniest thing about this is that George is just saying, I still want him. Also, watch out, you're kind of swimming in like really deep waters, so you might want to take a step back. And Lymond is like, yeah, no shit. Like, Douglas is saying, Lymond, be careful. You're dealing with some people that are really powerful and could screw you over. And Lymond is like, thank you for telling me. I had no idea. Oh my god. He actually says, life in an aquatic kettle can be quite entertaining. So not only is Lymond like, well, I fucking know, bro. He's just like, I kind of like it. Lymond knows exactly what he's doing. George, you can't threaten Lymond with saying that he's in trouble with big people. Lymond lives off this. Anyway, weird part of this book. What on earth was going on? It's like the top third of page 244. There's a page break. For no reason. They finish this line of questioning and finally they get to an agreement where if Samuel Harvey can actually be brought to Lymond and guaranteed, he would give up Will Scott. And that's the end of that. But then there's a page break. So they've had other discussion because after the page break, they're still discussing stuff. But the break implies that there's conversation that we missed out on, or like, Did they just chill by the fire, like playing cards for an hour? What are we missing? Dunnett, why you do this to us? So George is like, well, I still kind of want to own you and your services, so what do you say? Can you work for me? Can you? Can you? Lyman's like, yeah, nah. And this interesting line, 244, everyone credits me with projects. I sometimes feel like a latter-day Hercules. So there's all of these rumors about Lymond, about all of the things that he's supposedly doing, and Lymond finds out about them like secondhand. He's like, oh, so that's what people think I'm doing. It's just funny how the rumor mill just builds up this construction of a person and this caricature to the point where Lymond is just like, well, I'm not doing half of these things. I don't think Lymond truly wants to be the third Baron Coulter. Like, I don't think he actually wants to kill Richard. He's had opportunity to do so and hasn't, or at least, I mean, he wants to clear his name, I assume. It's just interesting because when George Douglas is saying to Lymond, well, now Lady Coulter is pregnant, you have another person in your way. George Douglas is suggesting that Lymond might now kill not just Richard, but now Richard's child. And Lymond just doesn't deny that. I mean, he has every opportunity to make himself look better in the eyes of a person, but always just steps in it. He just rubs it around. He takes all the salt and puts them through all of his wounds. He's like, what is the name of a person who loves to ruin their reputation? And it's not self-sabotage. Well, it could actually be a self-sabotage. Lymond is probably not the most stable person mentally. Or is he the most stable person in the book? What? I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to that question. Funny line, top of page 245, as they're moving from Peel Tower to the new place where all the gold is. Lymond's just walking around all of his men, dispensing criticism. I can totally imagine him just being like, that area isn't good enough, that area isn't good enough, just pointing out 1,000 things, and a trail of men just like peeling off behind him, trying to fix all of the things that he wants. Oh, and circling back to that, Lymond being surprised at Mariotta being pregnant, it was news to Lymond, is what George Douglas thinks, and I think that's probably correct. I don't know to what advantage Lymond would get by pretending to be shocked by that, other than feeding the idea into George Douglas that George Douglas can read Lymond and has one up on Lymond, and Lymond probably doesn't mind when the other person feels like they have power over him, because that's actually a powerful position for him to be in, because then he's underestimated. But I don't know if that's what he meant. I think he was genuinely shocked. And his pause, I like to think, was because he's gonna get a niece or nephew? I mean, wouldn't it be? Anyway, so Lymond doesn't defend his reputation, but he does turn the conversation around, because whilst George Douglas is suggesting that Lymond should murder his niece or nephew, Lymond, this is bottom of 244, well, and George Douglas is basically saying, if things go well for me, I will remember my friends, and I might even reinstate baronies, basically saying that he's trying to bribe Lymond here into being on his side because he will repay back favours. And Lymond thinks for it for a minute and then says, setting aside anarchy and murder and returning to simple conveyancing, how soon could Samuel Harvey be brought north? So he's kind of thought about this for a second, decided no, and tried to get back to the issue at hand that he actually wanted to discuss. And you can imagine what's going through Lymond's mind here. He's like, wait a minute, was I just considering agreeing to be bribed by a Douglas? That ain't happening. Like, as soon... And he's also trying to tell George Douglas that Lymond isn't for sale. His services can't be bought. There is no price that he can be bought for. That could be money or bribery. So what can Lymond be bought by? Honesty, I think, is the answer to that. Honesty. But we'll expand on this later, but I think Lymond very much values honesty. Top of page 245, Lymond describing Will Scott as a trained little puppy was kind of hot. Scott is trained to authority already. Yes, he is, Lymond. Yes, he is. Okay, now we go back to Will meeting his father. I was really excited about this scene because I just had no idea how it was going to play out. It's so hard. Will is very unpredictable. And it's quite hilarious because Will being the most inconsistent character in the book is just so juxtaposed about the fact that he's the only character that said that he values consistency. But his morality and his loyalties seem to sort of change with the wind. Or maybe it's not that they change, it's just that this was a phase. He was going through his rebellious phase, that he was always loyal to his father and to Scotland, and he's just having a little moment to himself at the with Lymond. But it's super high amusement factor, and now we can see why Lymond was just all like, that's so cute that you think you're consistent. Now we see in action the inconsistencies of Will Scott. From the point of view of his father, there is not a single person reading this book who is not charmed by how sentimental Wat Scott is. It's just, you can't not have a little bit of your heart melting at how Wat Bucklew is just so soft about his little boy. Little though, he's described at the bottom of 245 as having a thick neck, strapped with muscle, eyes like sea pebbles, don't know what that means, and his red hair roared like a lion. So Will is a big guy. I'm assuming bigger than Lymond, like taller and stronger than Lymond. But his own father was surprised at how strong he was, so he's definitely been doing some training with Lymond, that's for sure. But Will thinks, and this is going back to the beginning of the chapter, Will's like, I'm going to toy with my father, give him a chance to look at me, and I'm going to make some self-satisfied comparisons, because look how good I am, Dad. Look at me, look at me. He's just like a little boy, just being like, Dad, look what I can do. And it's just so mean because Will, your father just loves you. That's all it is. Loves you. It was so painful reading this. I was also really impressed and kind of proud of how good Scott was at arguing, because he's totally picked this up from Lymond. And when he punched his father, like dodged his father's punch and then got him a blow back, also because he learned that from Lymond. I was so proud of him then. I mean, we're proud of him, but then we just roll our eyes at him because we've got on page 247 after he lays out all of his argument, he's like, a diatribe worthy, Scott felt, of its inspiring genius. The response was the kind he often felt like making to Lymond, and had once made. He just self-congratulates himself on how well-spoken he is in front of his father. Look, Dad, look what I can do. So after Will punches his father and his father like skids across the ground, ouch, sounds really painful, he just drops down on his knees and picks his father up, and he's all sad, and suddenly they're like best bros again. What? Considering coming back with his father. Just like that, boom. And then Johnny shows up, finds out there's other people around, and just like that, boom, Will's like, oh hell no, I'm going back to Lymond. Will, you are ridiculous. But also I kind of like it because as soon as he heard his father, he was struck by the sentimentality that we know Wat has, and we can kind of see like father like son in how he had the same sort of, his heartstrings were pulled, and it's just so lovely to read. I loved this scene. It was really, I felt really bad for Wat when they were surrounded and Will assumed that it was a setup. I felt so bad for Wat, especially when like he actually was convinced to come home because he's just sitting down. They're just sitting down chatting, and Wat's like, so what do you say? And Will said, I've sworn to follow Lymond, as in I want to come back, but I've sworn this. So he basically admits it in those words. Will inconsistent Scott. On page 249 that we get more backstory into Lymond. And every time I get snippets of these backstories, I get confused, not gonna lie. 5 years ago is when Lymond's so-called betrayal to Scotland was found out. But what has happened in that 5 years? He hasn't been in London, even though it's suggested here that he got to London sitting safe with King Harry. and he got land and money handed to him. I totally want that prequel. I just want to see that. But he obviously wasn't with the English for those 5 years because something else has happened. And he's blown up a convent with all these women in it. And immediately all I can think of is this isn't true, that Lymond wouldn't have done that, or if he did, it would have been under duress, or he did it to save something even worse from happening. Because even Scott goes to defend Lymond at this point. And then what is like, well, Will defends Lymond, and what is like, well, no, like I saw the letter, Lymond organised it. Anyway, they have this discussion. Then they get found out. Johnny Bullough comes. This bit confused me. It was on page 251. Just as Johnny is about to escape with Will, Johnny turns around and says, so you're for Lymond after all? Because I think Johnny Bullough thought, oh, Will's going to defect back home. I just don't understand how Johnny came to that conclusion. Because if I was Johnny, I would have been confused. I would have seen he was about to go back with his father, and I'm assuming Johnny heard some of this conversation, and the only reason Will's now coming back is because he thinks that his father set him up, but he was about to. So didn't Johnny see how labile Will was with his loyalties? Johnny, though, is just, I love him so much. He's just here for the shits and giggles. Like, he's just here for entertainment. He just sits back and he's like, entertain me. And Lymond pays him for it, for his troubles to be entertained. He basically goes back before Will, dobs Will in. Betcha he's smiling the whole time. Lymond is obviously then furious, and he hangs around to see the fallout between Lymond and Will. Page 253, we have Will Scott stalked forward, prepared to get full value from the wrath boiling in his veins, and met the wall of Lymond at his worst. Whew. I mean, you know Lymond is angry when his opening line to you is, my dear. And Lymond has every right to be angry because, I mean, I kind of didn't really think about this too deeply at the time, but page 244, Lymond is absolutely right to be angry when he points out to Will that you are the only person here who might discover that he has something to gain by selling out. That is so true. You are the only person who is sure of a warm-moneyed niche waiting for him on the right side of the law. And that is, I think, how Will can afford to be so inconsistent, because he's got goodness wherever he goes. Will hasn't gone so far deep that he couldn't redeem himself. And Lymond is pissed that Will also put all of the other men at risk as well because of his own desire to see his father. And even though it wasn't Will's fault that the men were there, his naivety is what got him in the end, because Will could and should have considered that as a possibility. And yeah, he's not quite up to Lymond's thinking ahead strategy. He's still got too much think with the heart strategy, which seems to be characteristic of a Bucklew. And poor Lymond knows that all too well. Whenever Lymond is angry and insulting Will Scott, we get some of the best lines ever. like this, bottom of 253. Basically, like, Will is pissed off that Johnny came in and told on him, and Lymond just shrugs and says, you know Johnny, like, he wants the mischief, what do you expect? Johnny makes mischief as cows make milk. You know that as well as I do, but at least he does it with his brain and not his stomach, or wherever you keep your unique emotions. I'm going to use the word unique emotions. It is such a backhand insult. Oh my gosh, Lymond. I think that at this point, Lymond is a little bit pissed off at Johnny, maybe, at why, because Johnny went to see what Will was doing and didn't tell Lymond about that, and could have. So I don't know, I don't quite understand Lymond saying, well, you sprang the trap. On the whole, this business of manumission is a little trying. I doubt if I have the nervous stamina to just sustain it much longer. Is that Lymond saying, please tell me next time and don't just do your own thing? Not that I think Lymond can control Johnny, but then Lymond literally goes to the door and shows Johnny the door and is like, get the fuck out. Because Johnny is like, having withstood the blue eye for as long as self-respect demanded, sauntered outside. But Lymond was showing him the door. Like, he said, you've seen enough, get out now. Top of page 254. When Will says, it was none of your business, I didn't have to tell you, Lymond is like, let's just get this straight. Double dealing is my business, sweetheart. As if basically saying, don't even try to double deal. You can't do it. You suck at it. Leave it to me. The fact that Will is trying to say, I just wanted to talk to my father, I wasn't double dealing with you, is very naive, and that's what Lymond is trying to point out. And then at the end of all of this, when Will finally realizes his mistake at the danger that he put the men in, this is the second time he's done this after he went to Hume Castle and nearly got a whole bunch of men killed because he didn't do what Lymond says. Lymond is like, well, I'm waiting for an apology. And Scott, like a little boy, just mumbles an apology and doesn't actually say it straight. And that is when Lymond gets pissed off because he's waiting for an apology. Will is just like, meh, 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 meh. And he literally intimidates Will. Lymond walks straight up to the boy, impeccably and unpleasantly sober. We don't want an unpleasantly sober Lymond, do we? And of course here we have the line that sums up potentially all of Lymond's actions. Intentions, yours or anyone else's, don't matter. They never matter and never excuse. Get that into your head. So this is page 255. I think this is where Lymond's soul has been dragged across the rocks because he's tried to do something really good. It is monumentally been screwed over and made him look like he was doing everything bad. And Lymond has realised that no matter how much he says that he had good intentions, the consequences were so bad that nobody really cares. I think that's where Lymond is at the moment, and he's trying to tell Will that it's kind of like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You can say it as much as you want, but if people are literally dying left, right and centre, how good are you really? Why does Lymond just not defend himself at all to Will? He just sets himself up as so bad in Will's eyes because Will now finding out about all of the women that apparently died at this convent that Lymond is accused of blowing up. Lymond just doesn't even defend anything, doesn't say anything to that. He just says, ill-advised Scott, don't bluster, and particularly don't bluster in that direction. Now get out of my sight. Like, he's basically saying, don't go there, go away. But he doesn't say anything that suggests that he was innocent, you know? Why? I mean, maybe he's truly not innocent. Maybe I hope we find out. Maybe Lymond was just as naive as Will was at one point, and the fact that and Lymond teaching Will is his own way of redeeming his own mistakes. I don't know. I still don't know what Lymond is trying to do. Like, I assume he was trying to just stop the war between England and Scotland. He could just be on the Scottish side, but Lymond must know that no matter what happens, even if Scotland was to win, 10 years later it would break out again. Like, what is Lymond trying to do? Is he trying to save as many lives as possible? Like, the only thing I can think of is that he's trying to be a martyr where everyone turns so much against him that they are too distracted with him and not distracted with killing each other. At least, I don't think that was his initial intention, but maybe it is now that his reputation is so soiled. He's like, well, I may as well make use of it.